I am Chris. Welcome to the final part of my real revolutionary story. This is the real revolutionary part of the story. This is the part in which I share how to bring down the systems that control the way we live our lives. However, before I do that, I need to explain how we prepare for the consequences of that revolutionary act. Fortunately, the way we do that is the same way we prepare for the consequences of climate change. In the last episode, I said we need to value our trade and use of resources, as well as our employment in society, by time. As with our stories about God, our original measures of value did have some real worth, and we do need to have a means to measure the value of resources and our use of them. But we cannot just make that value up to suit our own patterns of life or borders. Time is the current of existence and should be the measure of value in our economy. We give time to society and should therefore receive time as currency, with all resources being valued by the time it takes for them to form over the quantity accessible in that or any given amount of time. Therein, a ton of board produced from regrown woodland pine would have a lower trade value than a ton of board produced from an ancient redwood sequoia, for instance. In the current economic model, a person working in a full-time job, earning £50,000 a year for 40 years, has a total income of £2 million. Whereas 2,016,000 minutes is equal to working 28 hours a week, 48 weeks a year for 25 years. Of course, there is no equivalency between time and money. But in a time-based economy, we could commit to work those hours and receive our currency share upon adulthood, with the same value going to society for the provision of our welfare within it upon our birth. However, the point is, we do not need to do half the jobs we do. A lot of jobs are just servicing the system, passing materials and bits of data around to perpetuate the idea that someone somewhere has possession of something and the value of that thing is relevant to our existence. Even donut economics won't stop us eating up time like that. We are all born into societies and cultures that have been in place for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Due to the many inequalities of our civilization, where we are born makes a difference to the quality of our lives. Since our first steps on two legs, we have spread to different parts of the planet. Sailing, railways and flying made that easier. But the internet has put the world at our fingertips without moving. We are now able to see how people live right around the globe, and the result is we can see all those inequalities laid bare, and can no longer ignore the harms that our so-called progressive societies are causing our planet and humanity. The legacy of the destructive nature of the growth and development of our civilization. The genocide in Gaza is at the extreme end of the destructive nature we humans have cultivated. But it is not an isolated incident. At least 4 times as many people are displaced in Sudan. the Democratic Republic of Congo is being torn apart for minerals. Ukrainian and Russian drones have been targeting oil fields. Afghanistan and Syria are now ruled by terrorists. In Haiti, the violence has been rife since the earthquake there 15 years ago. It really does not matter how much we spend on it. When the environment of our planet changes, we have no means of defence against it. And yet we have been propagating those changes with our so-called civilised behaviour. The more developed a nation, the more they budget for defence. The more status symbols people earn, the more disposable income wasted on throwaway stuff, the greater cost it has to humanity and the rest of life on Earth. We had wars and were deliberately killing off our own species long before the birth of global trade. But it was the Industrial Revolution that really saw us put the lid on our own coffin. Since then, we have just been nailing it down. It was in the 1950s that people first perceived the historic links between changes in our environment and atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide. It was confirmed in the 1970s, and many times since. But since then, we have not realised the obvious truth. That changes in our environment on a global scale are the future we were warned about by God. Climate change is our reckoning, and we either learn to adapt to it or carry on in ignorance until we become extinct. It takes 30 years for carbon dioxide to have a warming effect on the atmosphere. And lest we forget, the 1950s were 30 years after the end of World War I, and the 1970s were 30 years after World War II. The correlation between war and climate change on so many levels is absolutely undeniable. Just is. All these things considered, in my opinion, adaptation means replacing money as currency with time. But that will not solve all our problems. I feel we also need to return to more or less how we lived during the COVID lockdowns. Basically, we only really need key workers working. The rest of us can get work, growing and distributing food and doing odd jobs for people in need in our communities. Or assisting with disaster relief, which is likely to be a common need in many countries around the world as our current and ongoing carbon emissions continue to cycle through and impact upon the atmosphere. We do not need people designing and building new weapon systems or drilling rigs, or furnishing private planes, boats, cars and houses with glossy, shiny surfaces to make them feel special and unique, or making our devices appear slow and inefficient by filling pages with data-heavy adverts and profile tracking algorithms. We do need to develop new building materials and clean fuels, but our focus for the immediate future has to be on facing up to the realities of our changing environment. How we do that is learning to live in community again. to end the age of global mechanisation and growth-led development, to begin a new age of local sustainable regeneration. We need to reshape society so that we are as self-sufficient as we can be in our own communities, whether that is by street or postcode or entire towns and villages. We have to build new local systems that enable the sharing of things like food, furniture, practical schools, social healthcare, emergency relief and home support. Realistically, the best place to begin to coordinate these new social structures is in and around our local schools. Using the facilities of our local schools or any suitable social space, we can improve our environments by creating areas to grow and share food, teach practical and personal skills, and provide social healthcare. Then use those structures to extend connections right across local areas, ensuring access to water, shelter, food, furniture, energy, healthcare, social support, transport and emergency relief for all the people, before broadening out those networks and developing community-based manufacturing and trade systems that ensure the equanimity of access to essential resources across the whole of society. It should not be very hard to achieve. COVID showed us we have the capacity to adapt in this way. The introductions of the euro and metric systems showed us that currency and value changes are possible. We have the technology to create time-based employment and credit apps on our phones. We also have the processes to make decisions together in our communities on the ways and means of creating all the structures and systems we need to support each other. But whether we do that before bringing the system down, or indeed the climate brings us all to our knees anyway, is a question I cannot answer. That said, we really are only just beginning to understand the global breadth, depth and parallels of our problems. But we do not need AI to work out how to solve those issues or coordinate our response. The neoliberalist agenda of automated production servicing a suppressed and compliant populace that repeatedly debits the larger part of their mediocre incomes to consume symbolically appealing products that increase the value of shares in corporations traded on markets, enabling people that possess the wealth to generate the circumstances to influence those social desires and perpetuate the growth required to improve our economy, is just the tip of the iceberg. The last 50 years of profit-driven global advancements in financial trading, information technology, and intelligent weapons are merely the visible parts of a monolith of destruction that has been building since we first claimed that the land beneath our feet and what we take from it all belongs to us. The fact is, the earth does not belong to us. The resources do not belong to us. They do not belong to people with shares in a company or bond to some commodity. Our houses are not ours forever, even if we have paid the full value of it and all the interest and charges put on it by a building society or bank. But they certainly do not belong to us if we have not paid all that money. And, even more so, if the rights to a property was sold after someone just claimed that land many years ago. That is the point, though. That is the point of all of this. We do not have to continue to perpetuate these lies. we can change the way we live our lives. And the quickest and easiest way to do that is to no longer pay mortgages or insurance premiums, credit card or any other monthly fees. If we stop handing over our earnings to these institutions, they will collapse and have no means to claim back property or pay collection agents or enforcement officers. We can shipwreck the financial system, and only our governments will be able to keep it afloat. Of course, if they bail it out again, when we deliberately crashed it into the rocks, we can sink our democratic structures too and launch unspoilt ones throughout our communities instead. Nobody owns the earth. We have to share it, and share it with all life on earth. Our institutionalized financial obligations are of no ecological benefit and perpetuate the harms caused by society. Happily, we do not have to lose everything we have worked for. That is, if we decide to reset the system ourselves, before the planet does it for us. Nevertheless, we do need to measure the value of all that we do in terms of ecological economy, rather than financial economy, and also perceive any right to possession on the basis of use, not ownership. If we are not using something, we do not need possession of it. Ultimately, what I think is that my ideas would allow all of us to have much more time for ourselves, to enjoy the time we have for ourselves doing the things we want to do. Whether that is raising children, travelling the world, building a house, gardening, upgrading an old car, or even playing computer games. If we all just slow down, do a little less, and take more time to appreciate the world around us and our own lives within it, we will find that we have what we need without money. What we need is community. A sense of belonging in society. A perception of being of equal value and of having equanimity of access to required resources in our locality, whoever we are and wherever we are in the world. In my opinion, to have that feeling of equality of choice constitutes our true sense of freedom. The ability to perceive our own being as having an equal value of social worth to every other member of our species, which we have never really achieved as citizens in our civilized societies, is, I feel, what a global community founded on the value of the time we give can give us. Freedom. Of course, on reflection, my story is not merely my own. A lot of my thoughts and words are mirrored by many other people, some of whom I have already named. As such, despite this real revolutionary story of mine being naturally heartfelt and honest, uncorrupted by anything but a desire to share my own truth, perhaps my truth is not enough on its own. In 1992, Tupac recorded the song Changes, in which he said, it's time for us as people, it's time for us as a people to start making some changes. Let's change the way we eat, let's change the way we live, and let's change the way we treat each other. You see, the old way wasn't working, so it's on us to do what we got to do to survive. Tupac also made prophecies about a black president and getting shot on that song, which was, sadly, the cause of his death in 1996. However, just like Bob Marley, who survived the shooting in 1976, and the Wailers on their album Survival, they were primarily singing about the oppression of Africans in modern society. Concurrently, the entire Wailers album Survival could be taken as a prophecy about the consequences of our corrupt capitalist culture and changes in our climate. On it, Bob does sing about the real revolutionary too. John Lennon, who in 1980 was also sadly killed by a gunman, was the Beatle that sang the song All You Need Is Love. And although it suggests love is all you need to learn how to play the game, where we're meant to be, and how to be ourselves in time, among many other things, that song does not really answer the question of what love is. Again, Bob Marley famously sang about one love. But the song One Love is actually about how we, people, get ready for Armageddon. Even so, all that said, in the end, whatever we choose to believe, whatever our own influences, the greatest of them all is the one we cannot touch, taste, see, smell, or hear, but one we can sense. It is love. It is also light. Love is the light. Love is our sense of the energy that is in us and all around us, which, if we can feel it, firing like it does on tiny bits of protein between the synapses of our body in every instant moment of our life, then we can use it to guide our own consciousness on its journey through time in this universal existence we all share. Truth or not, that is the point and end of my story. I am Chris. I am the real revolutionary. Thank you for listening to my story, but mostly, thank you for your time.